want to pull this up. Okay, can hear you.
Hello. Shall we start?
Luminous.
Shall we start? Yes, Assalamu alaikum everyone. So last time we finished the migration story, that how Muhammad Sallallahu went with Abu Bakr and he went through several obstacles to migrate from Makkah to Medina, right? So from Ghar Saw to the story of Suraka bin Malik, we covered it last time. So now Muhammad Sallallahu is in Quba, right, which is outside Medina. Okay, so that is the furthermost settlement outside the city of Medina, and therefore Muhammad Sallallahu is staying there, right? And he, as we already discussed in the previous session, that Muhammad Sallallahu has already left Ali Radhiyallahu Ta'ala, right, in order to return the possessions that he had of other people, right, the amana. So Ali Radhiyallahu Ta'ala was still in Makkah, so Muhammad Sallallahu was waiting in Quba for Ali Radhiyallahu Ta'ala, and also Abu Bakr also left his own daughters Asma with Abu Bakr and Aisha Radhiyallahu Ta'ala. So both of them were in Makkah as well. So they were waiting for Ali Muhammad Sallallahu and Abu Bakr Radhiyallahu Ta'ala were waiting for these three to come to Quba so that they can go with them. Okay. So Muhammad Sallallahu then started, the first thing that he did when he was in Quba, he stayed there for about 3 days and he started building a mosque there at Quba, right? Which was the first mosque in Islam, as you all know, that is the mosque of Quba. And the mosque of Quba, Muhammad Sallallahu also participated in building that particular mosque. And that particular mosque was during construction, but then Muhammad Sallallahu left Quba for Medina, right? He stayed there for three days. So he did not offer his first prayer at Quba, but he did start building the first mosque, right? He started building the Quba first, right? So it is the first mosque, but then it is not the mosque in which Muhammad Sallallahu prayed for the first time. The mosque in which Muhammad Sallallahu prayed for the first time was the Masjid an-Nabawi, right? So both of them got first in some sense. Right? And then at that time, migration became a fard, right? So it became a fardain. So do you guys know what is fardain? What is fardain? Huh? So what is the difference between fardain and fard kifaya? Sorry? No. Both of them are fard. Okay. Sorry? Compulsion? Both of them are fard, right? So both of them have to be done. But ayn is like individual. An individual has to do it, right? Everyone has to do it. Okay. So just for example, offering salah, zakah, right? Hajj, everyone. I mean, Hajj not for everyone. Yeah. And zakah is not for everyone as well. But those who can afford to do it, then they have to. Okay. So whereas fard kifaya is communal obligation, right? So for example, giving dawah is a fard kifaya. Okay. So if it is a communal obligation, everyone does not have to do it, but someone in the community has to do it, right? Otherwise, that whole community is responsible for not doing dawah, right? So therefore, you have two major kinds of fard. So ayn, which is the individual fard, and kifaya, which is the communal obligation. Okay. So then it became fard ayn to migrate. It was fard for everyone, right? It was an obligation on every Muslim to migrate from Makkah to Medina. Okay. And this particular commandment to migrate from Makkah to Medina came into phases, just like many commands, such as not drinking alcohol and different commands as well. They came in phases, right? Because Allah revealed His Sharia in phases, and so that if the Muslims they cross stage 1, they are now at stage 1, then they can move on to stage 2 and so forth, right? So this particular commandment also came into phases. So the first commandment that came, as you can see the verse as well, that and those who migrated for the cause of Allah and then they were killed or died, Allah will surely provide for them a good provision, right? So this is an encouragement to migrate. Okay. So now if you are going to migrate for the sake of Allah, Allah is going to provide you, Allah is going to give you even more. Okay. Okay, so this is an encouragement for the Muslims to migrate from Makkah to Medina. Okay, and then finally, after the encouragement, then it is made an absolute obligation on everyone, right? So the ayat of the Quran in Surah Baqarah, right, 97th ayah. So when the angel sees the soul of those who have wronged themselves scolding them, what do you think you were doing, right? So now the angels are scolding the person, and when they're taking his taking his soul out, when they're seizing his soul, and they're asking him, what do you think you were doing? Okay, and then they will reply, we were oppressed in the land, right? So they will say, oh, we were not able to do this, we were not able to do that because we were oppressed, right? We were not able to carry out certain commandments because we were oppressed, right? The angels will respond, was Allah's earth not spacious enough for you to emigrate, right? So angels will respond them back and say that you should have migrated instead of staying there, instead of being oppressed, instead of not being able to do your obligation, you should have migrated to any other place. Okay, it is they who will have hell as their home. What an evil destination, right? So this is a very strict commandment to migrate to Medina. Okay, why this commandment came? Because there were certain people who still stayed in Makkah even after everyone was going to Medina, and it was. Muhammad asked all the Muslims to go to Medina, but still some of them did not want to leave their wealth behind, right? So you didn't have bank accounts back then. So you had all your wealth in Medina, you had your property in Medina. So some of the Muslims at that time were hesitant not to come to Medina, right? Because they were having lives in Makkah. So why leave all of your wealth and all of your family and come to Medina? Okay. So then they gave this particular strict commandment to go and to migrate to Medina. And there was this particular Sahabi, his name was Junta ibn Damura, right? So this Sahabi was old, he was blind, and when he listened to this verse for the first time, he was in Makkah as well, and he could not even properly walk. So when he listened to this verse, and then he immediately set off to Medina, right? And he then died halfway through, going immediately after he left Makkah. It's like a few times later, he died, right, outside of Makkah, right? So then the Sahaba, they said that, okay, he almost made it, right? So, he almost made it, but it is still not enough, right? So because the commandment, the verse is very clear that you have to come to Medina, you have to migrate, right? So the Sahaba were like, he almost made it, but still not quite, right? But then Allah then revealed the next word, except helpless men, women, and children who cannot afford a visa, right? So except for those who are helpless, right? Those such as, for example, this Sahabi was handicapped in a sense he could not come, right? So it was very difficult for him to walk, difficult for him to migrate to Medina. So these people like them who are not able to come, so then they are men, women, helpless men, women, and children, they are afforded leniency by Allah, right? They do not follow the obligation which is there in the previous verse. Okay, and then after the mosque was built at Quba, then Muhammad announced that after 3 days he announced that he's going to Medina. Okay, and then of course the news is spread that Muhammad is entering Medina. So therefore, that at the time when he was entering, then a Jewish man, he saw Muhammad and he announced to the people of Medina that your king has arrived, right? So he did not say my king or our king. He said your king has arrived, right? So then the people of Medina, they were very excited, right? And they came, the men, they came out dressed to welcome Muhammad, and Abu Bakr was with him, right? And then everyone was keen on having Muhammad as a guest. Okay, Muhammad was entering into the city of Medina, and therefore he wanted to stay. He did not have any house there, so he wanted to stay. So everyone was keen on welcoming him. Okay, and then Muhammad let his camel. Then Muhammad's camel started wandering. So Muhammad said, "Let it go, because Allah has taken charge of this camel." Okay, basically where the camel is going to sit, then a decision is going to be made then. Okay, and then camel sat on a property which belonged to 2 orphans, right? Sahal and Suhail was the name of the 2 orphans, and the property belonged to them. Okay, and then Muhammad understood that the camel is set here because Allah wants a masjid to be built here. Okay, and then Muhammad asked Sahal and Suhail that if he can purchase this land, and they said that there's no need to purchase it, you can take it for free, right? But Muhammad, as you guys know from the previous experiences, from the previous lessons as well, that he would not take anything for free, right? So he would always pay whenever he was taking something from anyone, he would always pay them, right? And in this particular instance, he also did the same. He insisted on paying them, and therefore they took the payment, and that particular plot was purchased from Sahal and Suhail, and the construction of the masjid started, right? Which was named Masjid Nabawi, which is still Masjid Nabawi today, right? So that was the first mosque built within Medina. Okay, Quba is the outskirts of Medina, but this is the first mosque built within Medina. Okay, within the main center of Medina. Okay, and then Muhammad Sallam also asked the people who lives near this particular quarter, which we have just purchased, this plot of land, where who amongst my relatives lives the nearest to this one. Okay, so the question is, how did Muhammad Sallam had relatives in Medina? How did Muhammad Sallam had relatives in Medina? He asked, who of my relatives lives near this particular land? Right? So he asked the people of Medina this question. So the question is, how did Muhammad Sallam had relatives in Medina? Sorry? Maternal family. Ancestry, but from whom? I think we did it in the first session. Or the second one. I don't remember. I think the second one, yeah. Remember? No? Huh? Quraysh? There was no Quraysh in Medina. So, yeah, Muhammad Sallam, who was the father of Muhammad Sallam? Abdullah, and the grandfather? Abdul Muttalib, and the great grandfather? Hashim, right? So Hashim was the one who established the Rilat al-Shatai was Swaib, right? And then he was the one who married a woman from Yathrib, okay? And then when he married the woman from Yathrib, their son was Abdul Muttalib, right? His name was Sheba to Ham, and then his uncle was Muttalib, and when he was in Medina, Sheba was growing up in Medina. His uncle came to Medina and he recognized that he's not from Medina, he's from the Quraysh, right? And then he recognized that he is the son of Hashim, so he took him back, and therefore when he took him back, the uncle's name was Muttalib. So when people saw him, they thought this boy is the slave of Muttalib. So they used to call him Abdul Muttalib from then on, okay? And then this name stuck, Abdul Muttalib. So Muhammad Sallam had relatives from Yathrib, from Hashim, right? From his great grandmother, okay? From great grandmother, he had his relative. So Abu Ayyub Ansari was one such relative, and he said that I'm the one who is your relative, because the Arabs, they were experts in genealogy and lineage. So he knew that he's the relative of Muhammad Sallam. So he said that I'm your relative, and therefore Muhammad Sallam decided to stay at his house. Okay, while the masjid was being built, and after the masjid, his home, Muhammad Sallam's own home, was being built as well. So during that time, Muhammad Sallam stayed at the house of Abu Ayyub Al Ansari. And this gives this particular incident also tells us that what is the importance of relatives and relationships, right? Because Muhammad Sallam preferred his relative above everyone else. Right? So you also have to, in Islam as well, right? So the best form of charity is the charity that you can give to your relatives, right? So if your relatives are in need, then you give them the charity instead of going to somebody distant, right? So the ones who are closest to you, you take care of them, and then you spread out. Okay, so this is what Muhammad Sallam demonstrated here as well. Okay, and then afterwards, one of the first things that were done by Muhammad Sallam was the establishment of the Wafa, right? So that is the brotherhood, Wafa, okay, which is the brotherhood amongst the Muhajirun and the Ansar. Again, Allah also talks about it in the Quran, that they give the immigrants, so Allah is talking about Ansar, they gave them preference over themselves, even though they may be in need. Okay, so Allah is praising Ansar in the Quran, that they gave the Muhajirun preference even above themselves, even though they themselves were in need. Okay, and this brotherhood was established between one Muhajir and one Ansar. So an example can be the brotherhood between Abu Bakr and Kharija bin Zayd, right? So Kharija bin Zayd was from Ansar, and Abu Bakr, as you guys know, from Quraysh. So this was the brotherhood which was established, and from the Seerah we also know, from the Hadith also we also know that Abu Bakr and Kharija, they were of similar mentality, right? So Muhammad Sallam knew that they would get along, so therefore he established brotherhood between them. Umar and Utban bin Malik, right? And then a famous one is between Abdurrahman bin Auf and Saad bin Rabi'a. Okay, and this is the one which is quoted most often. So in this one, Saad bin Rabi'a, when he got to know that Abdurrahman bin Auf is his brother, then he said that I'm going to give you everything in half, right? I'm going to give you half of my wealth, half of my land. I have two wives, I'll divorce one, I'll give you one. Okay, and then Abdurrahman bin Auf said that there's no need for that. I will just tell me where's the marketplace. I will go buy and sell there, right? And then I will earn on my own. So there's no need for giving everything in half, right? So then Saad bin Rabi'a basically showed him the way to the souk, to the market, to the souk, to the market. And then Abdurrahman bin Auf went there and he started buying and selling. And of course, as you all know, that he became one of the richest Sahabi. Right? And Abdurrahman bin Auf was a very good businessman, and therefore that gave him that buying and selling. Then he started increasing his wealth and became one of the wealthiest. And then another very most often quoted story is the story of Salman al-Farsi and Abu Darda. Okay? And this is a Sahih hadith as well, if I'm not mistaken, it is in Bukhari or Muslim, right? One of the two. Okay, so it is a Sahih hadith. I think it is in Bukhari, that Salman al-Farsi was the brother to Abu Darda, and then he went to Abu Darda's house, and Abu Darda's wife was in a very petty condition, right? And then Salman al-Farsi saw her, and he asked her, what happened? Why are you in such a condition? Right. So then his wife, Abu Darda's wife, said that your brother has no interest in the worldly luxuries, right? So your brother just prays and does nothing else, right? So then Salman al-Farsi sat with him for food. Then Abu Darda told him to eat the food. Then Salman al-Farsi said that you eat as well, right? Otherwise I'll not eat. Then Abu Darda said that no, I'm fasting. So Salman al-Farsi said no, you eat, otherwise I'm not eating. So Abu Darda ate with him. And then afterwards, Salman al-Farsi was going to sleep. So Abu Darda said that no, you sleep, I'm going to pray. So then Salman al-Farsi said, no, you sleep as well. Otherwise I'm not going to sleep, right? So then Abu Darda went to sleep. And then afterwards, in the middle of the night, Abu Darda then woke up and then said that I'm going to pray. And then Salman al-Farsi said, no, you sleep for now. You just have slept a little bit. So you sleep. And then we pray at the end of the night, right? So the end of the night, we are going to pray. And then they woke up at the end of the night and then they prayed. Okay. And then Salman al-Farsi said that Allah has rights over you, and so has your body, so has your family, right? So you have to take care of all of them. Okay. And then when Abu Darda went to Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and then told Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam this story, then Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, Sadaqa Salman, right? Which means Salman has said the truth. Okay. And this is the essence of Islam, that you don't go into excess in your worship, you don't get to go to excess in anything, right? You keep the middle way, you take the middle path. Okay. And then initially at that time, the inheritance, one brother, the one Muhajir can also inherit from one Ansar. Okay, but then this was later abrogated in the Quran as well. The Quran then later abrogated it, and the inheritance only is distributed now amongst blood relationships. Okay, and then afterwards, as we can see, the pillars of Islam are also being established in Medina, because now Muslims are free to pray. Muslims are now a community. Instead of being oppressed in Mecca, they are now a community in Medina, and they are the ones in charge as well. So the pillars of Islam are being established here. Okay. So then before that, as you all know, that Salah became first after Miraj, right? So which was in Mecca. So then it was 2 rakah, right? So 2 rakah, 5 times 2 rakah, right? And then afterwards, then the prayer, and this is the hadith which I'm going to quote, when the prayers was first joined, they were of 2 rakah each, right? Aisha radhiyallahu anha is telling this in Bukhari. Later, the prayer in a journey was kept as it was, but the prayers for non-travelers were completed, right? Which means the rakah that we have right now for Fajr 2, Dhuhr 4, right? Only the first rakah, right? And then Asr 4, and then Maghrib 3, and then Isha 4, right? So now the number of rakah were increased to the rakah that we have right now. Okay, initially they were 2 only, and then in Medina, when the Muslims became a community, then they were increased to what we have right now. Okay, and then Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, there was a need because there were many Muslims. Previously, the Muslims could fit into one house, but now there are many Muslims, right? So there was a need for call to prayer, right? Someone has to call the people to come to prayer, okay, to come to the masjid, to come to prayer. And then this particular for this particular need, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, as was his sunnah, he asked advice with his own companions, right? He called a shura, he asked for advice, and then they said, okay, why don't we ring a bell, okay? And this was Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did not like the bell, and it was the way of the Christians, right? So someone said, we ring the bell like the Christians, right? So Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and the others, it was not accepted. And then afterwards, there's some other person said, okay, why don't we blow horns, right, like the Jews do? So then that one was rejected as well. Then there was no decision that was made. Okay, and then at night there was this particular Sahabi, his name was Abdullah bin Zayd. Okay, and then he saw in his dream that a man is telling him the words of the Adhan, right? Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, right? So all up until the end, someone is telling him the words of the Adhan, right? And then he woke up and then he went to Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And then he straight away told him that I saw this in a dream, right? And then Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam asked Bilal to say the Adhan, right? And that will become the call of the prayers of the Muslims. Okay. And then he also asked Abdullah bin Zayd to tell Bilal what are the words of Adhan. And then Bilal then called the azan for the first time, and then he became the first Muslim of Islam. Okay, and now once the azan is established, the Muslims, as they were doing in Makkah, they were praying facing towards Jerusalem, right? And Jerusalem is where? Is it towards the north or is it towards the south of Medina? Okay. South? Okay. Sorry, up, right? So what is up? Is it north? Yeah, north, right? It is north of Medina, right? So they were praying facing Jerusalem, so praying facing towards the north. Okay, so the Qibla was Jerusalem, Bayt al-Maqdis, it was towards the north. And then Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, basically he entered into a treaty which we'll also cover in the next slide with the Jews. And he initially the Muslims had good relationships with the Jews, but then the Jews they were extremely arrogant, of course, because they considered themselves as a civilization, right? With the Arabs did not have a civilization. So therefore this arrogance was not liked by Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And therefore, the tensions between the Muslims and the Jews, they started developing at that time, right? So the Muhammad started praying that instead of Bayt al-Maqdis, right, started praying to Allah that instead of Bayt al-Maqdis, make the Kaaba as the Qibla, right? And then he also asked Jibreel in one narration that ask Allah to make the Kaaba as the Qibla. Then Jibreel said that I'm only a messenger. I cannot decree what Allah has decreed, right? So then afterwards, after Muhammad prayed for a while, then this particular verse was revealed. Okay, so this verse I'm not going to read all of it. I'm just going to read some of it. So turning your towards a prayer direction that pleases you, right? So then Allah tells that this is the one that pleases you. Then He commands that turn your face in the direction of the sacred mosque. Okay, at Baytul Haram, sacred mosque, right? And then therefore this commandment came that the Qibla has been changed, right, from the Baytul Maqdis to the Masjid al-Haram, right, which is Makkah. Okay, so from Jerusalem, from north to south, because Medina is towards the north of Makkah. So from north it came towards the south, right? So if the Qibla was, let's say, this is the north, if the Qibla was that way, then it became that way, right? The exact opposite, right? So then this is what happened. Then Muslims then turned towards Makkah, and then they started praying from then on, facing towards the Makkah, and they still do to this day. Okay. And then, of course, for the salah, all the time we need the wudu, sometimes we need the ghusl, right? So therefore, these laws were also established during Medina, during the early stages of Medina as well. And then the other pillars also were established, right? Such as fasting in Ramadan, right? And then zakat was also made obligatory, right? For those who can afford it, right? And which pillar is missing? So fasting is there, of course. Testimony of faith is there. Salah, they're already establishing. Fasting, and then zakah. Which one is missing? So why is the commandment to Hajj not given? Yeah, good. Right. So because the Makkah was still under Quraysh, right? So Hajj is going to come after the conquest of Makkah. And then once the brotherhood between the Muslims was established, right? Once the Muslim community was stabilized, and then therefore a community center sort of for the Muslims, which was the masjid, was also established. Then Muhammad Sallam reached out to the other groups that were there in Medina. Okay, the chief amongst them were the Jews, right? There were three tribes, as we just mentioned in the previous session, right? Banu Qainuqa, Banu Qurayza, and Banu Nazir, right? So these were the three tribes that were present in Medina, and they were wealthy, they were of prestige, right? And the people of Medina looked up to them. I mean, the Arabs in some ways, before the coming of Islam, they looked up to them, right, as a civilization. Right? So therefore, Muhammad established a pact with them, okay, and also a pact amongst the Muslims, and also the pact amongst the groups that belonged outside the Muslims. Okay? And then I'm going to read out some of them, and then I'm going to explain them, right? So the first one, every sub-tribe to take care of their own welfare. Right? So sub-tribe, this is regarding the Muslims, right? So amongst the Muslims, among the Aus and the Khazraj, we discussed in the previous session that there were two tribes amongst the Muslims, right? The Aus and the Khazraj. Okay. So amongst the Aus and the Khazraj, there were many sub-tribes, right? So those sub-tribes are going to take care of their own welfare. Okay. So which means that if there is a poor person, right, and they want to feed, right? So they take care of their own, unless they want to reach out, right, which they can. But it was completely right. It was completely upon the sub-tribe to take care of their own poor, to take care of their own needy. Unless they wanted help, of course, then they can come. but they were given the autonomy to basically discharge their own affairs, okay, in terms of welfare. And then if there are disputes, internal disputes amongst the sub-tribes, right, so they sort it out upon their own, okay. And then etc. The other minor disputes that are there within a sub-tribe, they have to judge amongst themselves and to sort it out amongst themselves, okay. And then, but if let's say once a sub-tribe amongst the Muslims does an oppression against another sub-tribe, right, then all the sub-tribes will have to unite, all the tribes will have to unite against the oppression, right. Now our identity is established as Muslims. It is not as the tribal identity was there before Islam, okay. So now, as we can see, that Muhammad is establishing an identity, right, which is not tribal. Right. There are, of course, you cannot completely abolish tribalism, right? So there are, of course, tribal identities there, but they are there for an instrumental purpose, right? Whereas the major identity which Muhammad is establishing is the identity of the Ummah, right? The identity of religion, right? Which religion do you follow, right? So he has identified the Jews as one Ummah, and he has identified the Muslims as one Ummah, and then the pagans, the Mushrikun, as the third Ummah, okay, as the third group. Okay, so the group, then the primary identity of these people now in Medina is being made the religion, okay, which then, of course, throughout Islamic history, the primary identity was religion. Of course, now, throughout Islamic history up until 100 years ago, right, of course, now we have the nation state, unfortunately, right, as the primary identity. But yeah, this is what happened after the Khilafah collapsed. Then the Muslims were divided into nation states, and now people are either Pakistani or from Saudi Arabia, right? Before that, it was not so much the primary identity. It was not as the Muslim world was not as divided as it is now, right? So the primary identity even back then was that of the Ummah, of the Muslims, right? And then the others were recognized by the religion as well. Okay, so this tradition started in Medina. Okay, and then the pact with the Jews, all Jewish sub-tribes to take care of their own welfare. This is also understood. And then in case of an attack, Jews and Muslims to unite, defend and donate, right? So Muhammad gave the Jews the autonomy to take care of their own affairs. Okay, the Muslims are not going to interfere in the affairs of the Jews, so they can dispense justice as they see and take care of their own affairs. But if someone attacks Medina, from outside, then the Jews and the Muslims will have to unite, and then they have to physically participate if they have to, and they have to participate through their wealth as well, donate as well. Okay, so this pact was done with the Jews. And then the Jews which are seeking to convert must be protected, right? So the Jews wanted to become Muslim, right? So the other Jews cannot kill them, right? They have to be protected and they have to be allowed to enter Islam, right? This was the pact that Muhammad made with the Jews. And then the third Qawm, the third Ummah, the pagans, right? The pagans to remain neutral in conflicts with the Quraysh, right? So the pagans, because there were some pagans still present in Medina. Later, after the Battle of Badr, all of them converted to Islam. But then here, some of the pagans are still there in Medina. So these pagans, if there is a conflict with Quraysh, they have to remain neutral. Okay, and then Muhammad then, of course, any disagreement to be decided by Allah and His Messenger, right? So that means that if there is a disagreement between the Jewish community and the Muslim community, right? So then in that case, all between the Muslim community and the Mushrikun, right? So amongst them, if there is a disagreement, then that has to go to Muhammad. Of course, there has to be a final authority, and that final authority is Allah and His Messenger Muhammad. Okay. So if there is a dispute, if there is a dispute within the Jews, within the Muslims, right, within the sub-tribes, there's a intra-tribal or intra-communal dispute, then that has to be solved within the community, within the tribe, right? But if it is an inter-tribal dispute, inter-community dispute, then that has to be solved by Muhammad. Okay, and then whoever leaves or stays in Medina shall be saved, except for one who does an injustice or sin, right? So you can go in and out of Medina, there's no problem. But if you cannot go out, you cannot go out if you've done an injustice or you've done a sin, right? For that, you have to be brought to justice. Okay, and then finally, Muhammad also said, assigned the area of Medina, right? So he demarcated the area of the Haram, right? He said that Medina is also Haram, and then amongst Medina there are two volcanic bases, right? And there are also two mountains, right? Which is the Ghair and the Thawr, right? These are the two mountains. So between the two volcanic bases and the two mountains, it is the Haram of Medina, right? Still to this day, these lines are there, and they demarcate the Haram of Medina. Okay, and then of course the obligation of the Haram, no fighting, right? And all of these obligations which are there in the Haram and were also established for Medina. Okay, during this pact of Medina. Okay, now after the pillars are established and after Medina is established as a community, then of course Allah gives the permission to the Muslims to fight against those who have oppressed them. Okay, so this particular verse is the permission that is this particular verse was revealed when Allah gave in this particular verse, I mean, Allah gave the permission for the Muslims to fight. Okay, and this verse says that permission is granted to those being fought, for they have been wrong. Okay, and Allah is truly most capable of helping them, because this is in Surah Hajj, verse 39, and Allah is saying that you should fight back, right, because you have been wrong. Okay, so this is, of course, this encapsulates the entire philosophy of fighting in Islam. Okay, so you fight if there is an injustice, you fight against it. Okay, so sometimes then Muslims fought to defend themselves, and also sometimes Muslims fought when there was injustice. They saw injustice in other lands, right? So they fought. So such as in Spain. So in Spain, the Jews were being persecuted, and they came to Muslims and they asked for help. So therefore, the Muslims went to Spain. And then sometimes the Muslims also fought in order to open the lands of open the other lands to Islam. Okay, so these were the reasons for which Muslims fought, right? So and some of the people right now say that the Muslims, right? So Islam was spread by the sword, right? And the Muslims, they for them it's just fighting, right? So they Muhammad was sent there to fight, right? Muhammad his own. Some people say that he basically started fighting with everyone, okay, for no reason, right? And therefore, this particular verse, which is the verse which encapsulates the spirit of jihad, right? This particular verse denies it and says that the permission has been given to fight because you have been wrong, right? So therefore, in Islam, fighting is an instrumental, okay? So it is a ways to achieving an end, and that end goal is justice, okay? So if you want to establish justice, sometimes you need to fight as well, okay? And therefore, when this particular commandment was given, then before that, okay, do you know what is the difference between Ghazwa and Seerah? What is the difference between Ghazwa and Seerah? Any idea? Which one? Prophet participated. Good. So Prophet participated in Ghazwa. So in the expeditions in which Prophet participated, they are called Ghazwa. Whereas in the ones he sent, but he did not participate himself, they're called Seerah. Okay. So Seerah of Ubaidah bin Harith, right? Ubaidah bin Harith bin Abdul Muttalib. We have discussed about him in the previous session as well, that he was amongst the earliest converts. And this was probably the first Seerah which was sent by Muhammad against the Quraysh. Okay, so the caravan of the Quraysh was going. As you all know, that Hashim was the one who established Rela the Shitai was Soif. So they would go to Yemen and they would go to the Roman Empire, right? They would go to Syria. They would go to Syria in the summer and Yemen in the winter, okay? And then they would trade goods and they would come back and they would sell it to the Arabs, and that is how Quraysh became the most prestigious tribe, okay? So the Quraysh, when they were going all the way to Rome, so because when they're going towards the Roman Empire, towards Syria, it is towards north, so they have to pass through Medina, right? Pass close to Medina. So therefore, Muhammad sent this Seerah under the leadership of Ubaidah bin al-Harith bin Abdul Muttalib, right? Who was his cousin as well. So Ubaidah bin Harith, we are going to discuss about him later as well. He also played a role in Battle of Badr. So he then became the first leader of any expedition that was sent by Muhammad, right? And then in this expedition, of course, they encountered Quraysh, and Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas was the one who threw the first arrow. Okay, but then the another tribe basically arbitrated between the Quraysh and the Muslims, and therefore nothing happened. Later, the fighting did not happen, no killing happened, and therefore both of the parties left. Okay, and then there were other battles as well, so we are going to skip because we don't have time. So then another important one was the Seerah Nakhla. Okay, in this one, because Muhammad wanted to know when the Quraysh are leaving, when they're going, right? In order to attack them, you have to know where they are, right? You have to know their whereabouts, right? So then under Abdullah bin Jahash, who was his cousin as well, so he sent 8 men, okay? And he told him, Abdullah bin Jahash, to go towards north. And then he started going towards north, and he also told him, Muhammad also told him that take this letter and open it after 2 days. So then these 8 men, then they started going towards north. And then after 2 days, when they were up north, then they opened it. Then Muhammad said, okay, go back down to south, go back to near Nakhla, which is near Taif, right? Which is south. Taif is the south of Mecca, right? So go back there, okay? And then find out. And then, so they went back there, went back south, and then they went to this particular place, Nakhla. Okay, and then when they were going there, while they were going there, so the camel, so there were 8 men and there were 4 camels, right? So every person was sharing 1 camel. Okay, so 2 men, 1 camel. So the camel of Saad bin Abi Waqqas and I think Utbah, right? So these 2 people, they were sharing 1 camel and the camel went, right? So it wandered, so they could not find it, so they just left the other 6 people to find the camel, right? And the other 6 people, then they found the Quraysh. There were 3 people of the Quraysh, they were guarding the camels. Okay, then they thought of attacking them, but then they were reminded that this Rajab, right? So then why were they hesitant to attack them in Rajab? Any idea? Huh? Good, right? So it is one of the sacred months, right? So which are the other 3? It's not Ramadan. No, it's not. Battle of Badr happened in Ramadan. Yes. Which one? There are 4. Rajab is one of them. What about the other 3? Muharram is one of them. Safar is not. Zulhajj, of course, yeah. Yeah, Zulqa'dah and Zulhajj. Right, so these 4, right? Zulqa'dah, Zulhajj, and then Muharram, and then Rajab. Okay, so these 4. So it was the last day of Rajab, so they were hesitant, but then they decided to attack, right? And then they killed 1, and then they took 2 others as prisoners. Then when they went back to Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, then Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was, of course, he was not happy because they had because Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did not tell them to kill anyone, right? To attack, and at that time, and also it was the sacred month, right? So the Quraysh. Then the Quraysh went into a propaganda spree that look, the Muslims, they have killed someone in the sacred months. Okay, so Muhammad Sallam was not happy with them, but then Allah then revealed this verse, right, about the Quraysh, right, when they were spreading their propaganda. Right? So Allah said that okay, this is not a good thing to do, but averting people from the way of Allah and disbelief in Him and preventing access to Masjid al-Haram and the expulsion of its people therefrom are greater evil in the sights of Allah. Right? Okay, killing someone in the sacred months is not a good thing, right? What they did was wrong, but then what the Quraysh did was much greater than wrong than what they did. Okay, so Allah answered the propaganda of the Quraysh in such a beautiful manner in this verse. Okay, and then after Sariya Nakhla, the Ghazwat al-Ushaira. So this Ghazwa was just right before Badr, right? So when Abu Sufyan, the Abu Sufyan bin Harb, right, who was the leader, one of the leaders of Makkah, so he was going with a large caravan. And Muhammad Sallam flew all the way to Rome, right, all the way to Syria. So then Muhammad Sallam got to know about it. So he gathered 200 Sahaba, right? Immediately he told them to go and we will attack that particular caravan. Right? And then those 200 Sahaba then went with him. But then the Quraysh, they saw them, they saw the army of the Muslims. So therefore Abu Sufyan was informed, and therefore Abu Sufyan took another route, right? And then he informed to the Quraysh that the Muslims they might attack, right? So therefore the Quraysh began preparing for war. Okay, so now Abu Sufyan then evaded the Muslims at that time, right? And the Muslims could not find the caravan and they did not do anything, so they went back to Medina, right? And then Muhammad Sallam then waited for the caravan of Abu Sufyan to come back, right? It went up and then it has to come back as well. So then the Quraysh and everyone at that time, Muhammad Sallam and Quraysh, they had a network of spies, right? So they would tell them where the Quraysh are, the spies of the Quraysh would tell the Quraysh where Muhammad Sallam and his armies are, right? So then Muhammad Sallam sent Talha bin Ubaidullah, right? And Sa'id bin Zayd, right? One of the 10 blessed companions, right? So he sent 2 of them to look for the caravan when it is coming close to Medina. Okay. So when Talha and Sa'id bin Zayd, they saw the caravan of Abu Sufyan, which was coming with a lot of wealth, right? Some say 100 camels or even more, right? So it was a lot of wealth. So it was coming with a lot of wealth. So then Talha and Sa'id bin Zayd, they informed Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Okay. And then Abu Sufyan, he was also very clever, right? He also knew what to do. He was also cognizant of the fact that he could be attacked. Okay. So then he got to know that Muhammad Sallallahu has sent the spies, and therefore it is possible that he already knows that the caravan of the Abu Sufyan, caravan of the Quraysh is coming, right? Which was headed by Abu Sufyan. So therefore he looked at the dung. He there was the dung of the camel, right? So he looked at the dung of the camel and it had dates in it, right? So then he said that the date is from Medina, because Medina was one of the few places which grew dates, right? Medina, Khaybar. So he said that these camels are from Medina and they already know that we are here, right? So from that, he knew he was the spy master of his time, right? Just like we see in movies, right? So it happened in real life as well, right? So he basically examined the dung and he got to know that the people of Medina has been here and they already know that we are here, right? So then he again took a detour. He took another route to Makkah and he sent his most able horseman, his name was Damdam, right? He sent him to Makkah to inform the people of Makkah that your caravan could be attacked. He just immediately prepared for war. Okay. And then Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he was informed by Talha and Sa'id bin Zaid that the Quraysh, the 40 Quraysh are coming with many camels, 100 camels, right? So we can just go there and take the camels, right? So we can just take the people, take the camels. It's going to be easy expedition for us, right? And then Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, of course, when he got to know about it, so he did not want to waste any time. So he asked the Sahaba who were there, let's go, right? So let's go right now. So then the Sahaba said, okay, shall we bring our animals? We have not prepared them yet. So Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, no, there's no need to bring any extra animals. The animals that you have right now, we can take them and we can go. Okay. So the Sahaba at that time, they were expecting that they are going to just go there. There are 300 of them or even more, right? They're just going to go there and then they are going to show up. And then the 40 men of the Quraysh or some 40 odd men of the Quraysh, they are going to get scared. They're going to run away and they're going to leave the camels and their camels are going to belong to them. Okay. And you should know that the Quraysh, they were coming with a lot of camels and all of this, and these were the wealth that they confiscated from the Muslims. Okay, so that was a lot of the reason why this caravan was very big was because they confiscated and they confiscated the wealth which the Muslims left behind. Okay, from Makkah. So therefore, they wanted the Muslims also attack them so that they could get the camels from the Quraysh, right? From the caravan of Abu Sufyan. So then, when Abu Sufyan told the Quraysh began preparing for war. They put their armor on, and then they gathered 1,300 of them gathered, right? And then they had 600 armors, 100 horses, and 500 camels. On the other side, the Muslims do not have a clue that Quraysh already know. So they were expecting that they're going to just show up and they're going to take the camels and they're going to go back, right? So therefore, they had about 2 horses and 100 camels. So 310 something men, 313 or 315, and 100 camels. So 3 men per camel, and also 2 horses, only 2 horses, and men also not armored. Okay, so the men were not armored because Muhammad asked them to leave immediately. Okay, so therefore now on the other side, 1,300 of the Quraysh they gathered, okay, in order to fight the Muslims, and that included Abu Jahl, included Utbah and Shayba bin Rabi'a, right? So these were the chieftains of Quraysh, the noblemen of the Quraysh. Umayyah bin Khalaf, who was the owner of Bilal, right? And then Uqba bin Abu Mu'ayth, who was the worst enemy, right? He was the one who tried to strangle Muhammad, and he was also the one who dumped the carcass of the camel on Muhammad, right? We covered this as well. So Uqba bin Abu Mu'ayth. So these were the people. So Umayyah bin Khalaf and Uqba bin Abu Mu'ayth, they initially did not want to go because they were cowards, right? They did not want to go. But then Abu Jahl was the one who convinced Uqba bin Abu Mu'ayth to go, right? And then Umayyah bin Khalaf, right? So sorry, Umayyah bin Khalaf, Abu Jahl convinced him to go, right? He mocked him. He said that you are a woman and stuff like that, right? And then Umayyah bin Khalaf said, okay, I'm going to go, right? And then Uqba bin Abu Mu'ayth, he did not want to go, but then his relative said, okay, I'm giving you the fastest camel. If something happens, just come back, okay? So he said, okay, if something happens, I'm going to run, come back, okay? So then these people then started to go, and they had, of course, they were armored, they had horses, they had camels, and these camels included the camels for eating, right? So they were well fed as well. So they would sacrifice 10 camels a day in order to feed themselves, okay? So now, afterwards, Abu Sufyan takes a detour, goes to another route, and he realizes that he's safe, okay? And then once he realizes he's safe, he's close to Makkah, then he sends someone to tell Quraysh that you no longer have to fight a war, we are safe, it's okay. But then when the Quraysh hear this, then people started arguing, right? What is the next step that we have to do? Then Abu Jahl says, no, we have to go. We have to stay there for 3 days in order to show the might, right? We have to go to Badr. We have to stay there for 3 days to show our might, okay? But then others, including Utbah bin Rabi'a, right? He was hesitant in fighting. He did not want to fight. So he said that, no, we should go back, right? So then Abu Jahl said that no, we should fight. So 300 of them, right? They were 1,300 initially, so 300 of them, then they left. Okay, they went back to Makkah. They said we are not going to fight anymore because Abu Sufyan, he's safe. Okay, whereas 1,000 of them still were convinced by Abu Jahl to go and to fight. Okay, and then 1,000 of them went to the plain of Badr, right? As you can see that this Badr is a plain and it is close to Medina. It is a little bit further away. It is between Makkah and Medina. It is closer to Medina than it is to Makkah. So therefore the Muslims, they settled at Badr first. Okay. So the Muslims who were trying to chase the caravan of Abu Sufyan, they settled at Badr first and they were expecting the caravan. But then afterwards, then Muhammad Sallam realized that when caravan was not appearing, he realized that it is possible that an army will appear, right? So then he started asking the Sahaba, right? He started asking them, what if an army appears? What are we going to do then? Then the Sahaba, some of them became hesitant, right? Because they started saying that we don't even have our armors, we don't have our animals, right? So it is not a good idea to fight without armors and animals. Okay. So then this particular sentiment is also mentioned in the Quran, right? So when your Lord calls you to go out of your houses, but the truth was with you, a group of the believers did not like it. Okay. They began arguing with you about this truth even after it was made clear to them. It was as if you were dragging them to their deaths as they were looking at their deaths, as they are looking at their deaths, right? So they began arguing. They were okay. It's not. They were not convinced that it is the right plan to fight. Okay, and they wanted to go back to Medina because they were without the animals, they were without the armor, right? So therefore, this particular debate was going on amongst the Muslims. But then when Muslim wanted to make sure what was going on, so then he went himself to spy. Right? Then he went himself to spy along with Abu Bakr and he asked a Bedouin about the whereabouts of Quraysh. So the Bedouin then told him that the Quraysh are coming with an army which is with a strong army, right? The Quraysh are coming, and therefore Muhammad also knew about the Quraysh, right? That they are coming along with Abu Bakr, right? And in the meantime, the army of the Muslims also catch two of the slaves which were present in the army. So maybe the slaves were there hunting for something, right? Or they went there looking for something. So the Muslims, they catch them and they bring back to the army, right? So bring back to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And the army of the Muslims. So they asked the slaves of the Quraysh that where are you? Who are you? Where are you coming from? Right? So they say we are coming from. They said that we are coming from the army of Quraysh. So the Muslims they were hesitant, right? Army of Quraysh. So no, you are from the caravan of Abu Sufyan. You are lying. So they said no, we are from the army of Quraysh, right? So the Muslims they started beating him. No, you are lying. You are from the caravan of Abu Sufyan, because they were a bit desperate for it to be the army of Abu Sufyan and not to be the caravan of Abu Sufyan and not to be the army of Quraysh, right? Not to be fully armored army of Quraysh, right? So therefore, then he said that Muhammad sallam, who was praying at that time, then he said to them, no, he's telling the truth. And then he asked them, how numerous are they? Then the slaves said that we don't know, right? Because the slaves at that time didn't know how to count. So then Muhammad sallam said, okay, tell me how many camels do you sacrifice every day? Then they said 9 or 10. Okay. Then Muhammad sallam said that, okay, there are 900 to 1,000. He recognized that there are 900 to 1,000 people there. Okay. And then he recognized that there's no way they cannot go, right? So they have to fight. Okay. So then he asked the Sahaba that what should we do, right? So Abu Bakr, he stood up and he said that we are with you, right? And then he asked them again, what should we do? Then Umar, he stood up and then he said, we are with you, right? Then he asked again, what should we do? Then another Sahabi, Miqdad, he also stood up and he said that we should fight. We are going to do whatever you are going to do, whatever you are going to command us, we are going to do. We are not going to be like Bani Israel who told to Musa, you and your Lord fight, and we are not going to fight. Okay. So then Muhammad asked again, what should we do? Okay. And then Sa'ad bin Muaz, who was one of the leaders of the Ansar, he recognized that it is the Ansar because the other three were from the Quraysh, right? Abu Bakr, Umar, and Miqdad, they were from Quraysh. So then Sa'ad bin Muaz, he recognized that it is the Ansar that Muhammad is asking from, right? Because Muhammad, when he took the oath, when he took the pledge of Aqaba, right? The pledge was to protect Muhammad, right? Not to go on an offense, but to protect, right? So this was them coming out of Medina and then meeting the Quraysh, right? So this was not part of the pledge of the Aqaba, right? So therefore, Muhammad has to ask Sa'ad bin Muaz and the Ansar if they want to participate, right? So this was, of course, Muhammad was always stood by his promise. So he, of course, in this particular scenario as well, so he stood by his promise and he said that I'm not going to force you to join, So you have to, I mean, it indirectly, implicitly, it was meant that the Ansar are not being forced to join, but they're only going to join if they're going to agree. Right? And then Sa'd bin Muaz stood up and he delivered a passionate speech, basically saying that we are going to be behind you, whatever you are going to do. Okay. And then it was decided that Muslims are going to fight, right? And then the Muslim army, then Muhammad divided the Muslim army into three flanks. Okay. One was led by Musab ibn Umer. So he was the one who was sent by Muhammad to teach the Ansar to teach the people of Yathrib at that time the Quran and the Salah, right? So after the first pledge of Aqaba, Musab ibn Umair was sent, right? So he was given the charge of one of the flanks. And the other flank, Ali bin Abi Talib was given the charge of that flank. And then for the third one, which comprised mostly of the Ansar, Sa'd bin Muaz was given the charge, right? Because he was the chieftain of Ansar, so he was given the charge, okay? And this was probably the first time in Arab history, in the history of the Arabs, that they were organized like this, okay? Before that, they would have guerrilla tactics, right? So hit and run tactics, right? So they would have those tactics during war. They would not line up like this, and they would not be organized like this and fight, right? The Persians would fight like this, the Romans would fight like this in an organized manner. But the Arabs, they were not used to this. They would usually do guerrilla warfare, right? They would just hit and run and hit and run. They would do that, okay? So it was the first time in the Arab history that the armies were organized by Muhammad in this way, okay? And then just before the Battle of Badr, then just the night before the Battle of Badr, then Allah caused all the Muslims to sleep a good sleep, right? So they slept very well, except Muhammad who was worshipping. And then right before the battle, the Quraysh also came on the plain, and the Muslim army was also there. So therefore, the Quraysh could see the Muslims could see the Quraysh, and it was evident that the fight is going to happen, right? So then, right before the battle was about to commence, then Muhammad was still praying, and then he asked Allah that, oh Allah, if you destroy this group, you are not going to be worshipped on earth, right? Because Muhammad was the last prophet. So if this group is destroyed, then there's going to be no one who's going to worship you on earth, right? So therefore, Muhammad is pleading with Allah for his group to be victorious. Okay, he's praying with Allah for the Muslims to be victorious in this battle, and the odds are against them. Okay, and then the battle starts on the 17th of Ramadan, in 2nd Hijri, right? So it is in Ramadan, right? So, and then the first thing, as was the tradition amongst them, was the Mubarak, right? What is the Mubarak? Any idea? What was the tradition amongst the Arabs? What would they do if they wanted to start fight? What would they do? Sorry? Huh? No. No. Huh? Sorry? Send someone, and then what will messenger that we are going to fight? Flag? Yeah, but flag was held by Ali and Sa'd bin Muaz and Musab ibn Umair, right? They were already holding the flags. So how would you start a fight? You would do Mubaraza, right? What is that? Yes. A champion from one army, the champion from another army, they're going to fight. And then afterwards, after those fightings are done, then they are going to start the war, right? Then the war officially starts, right? So the Arabs, the Muslims, they use these tactics even in their war against the Persians and the Romans, right? So they were very successful with this. So they would just go there, and their armies would be significantly less than the Persians and the Romans, and the Khalid bin Walid would come, right? I'm the commander, get your commander, right? So if he's a real man, come. So then the other commander would also be obliged to come, right? So that he would come, and then he would get killed, and they would be without any leader, right? So this was a very clever tactic that was employed by the Muslims as well later in their wars with the Romans and the Persians. Okay, so in the Mubaraza, so Utbah bin Rabi'a, his brother Shayba bin Rabi'a. So previously Utbah was not keen on fighting, but then Abu Jahl was the one who stoked him to fight. You are not a man, and this and that, all of these things. And then Utbah said, okay, I'm going to fight. So he went with him, his own son, right, Walid bin Utbah, and his brother Shayba, right? So these three came from the Quraysh. And then Muhammad asked from Umayyah bin Khalaf, Muhammad asked Ali ibn Abi Talib, Hamza, right? And one more, right? So Ubaidah bin Haris, right? Ubaidah bin Haris is the one, as we did last in the previous this as well. Ubaidah bin Haris, right? Ubaidah bin Haris is the first Seerah that was sent was the Seerah of Ubaidah bin Haris, right? So it is the same Ubaidah bin Haris. Ubaidah bin Haris bin Abdul Muttalib, he was commanded by Muhammad to fight. Okay, Ubaidah bin Haris and Hamza and Ali, right? So these are the three who are fighting Utbah, Shayba, and Walid bin Utbah, right? So then, of course, Ali and Hamza, they immediately kill their adversaries, and Ubaidah bin Haris, his leg is cut off, his leg is chopped by Utbah, right? So Utbah gets the better of Ubaidah bin Haris and his leg is chopped. And then Ali and Hamza, because they're done with the fighting, so they come and they kill Utbah. Okay, so Utbah is also killed, and the Shayba is also killed, and his Utbah's son Walid is also killed. Okay, whereas Hamza and Ali, they do not suffer any wounds, whereas Ubaidah bin Haris, his leg is chopped off and he's bleeding a lot, right? So he would later become a martyr as well. He would die from these wounds. He would become a martyr. Okay, and he's amongst the first martyrs of Islam as well. Whereas he was the one who took the first blow as well. Okay, so then after the Mubaraza is done and the Muslims win, then of course the battle starts. The battle commences, and then the help from Allah also comes because Muhammad is constantly praying. So help of Allah comes, and the verse of the Quran also tells us about the help that came. So remember when you asked help of your Lord, and he answered you, indeed I'll reinforce you with 1,000 from the angels. Okay, so 1,000 angels came to help the Muslims at that time, right? So the angels, they gave an illusion to the Quraysh that the Muslims are numerous, right? So the Quraysh would then became disheartened by the numbers of the Muslims, right? And then when the Muslims were fighting, right, so there were stories, right, that were told by the Sahaba that when I was fighting, I was about to strike, but then that guy died, right? Something struck him, and then he died himself, right? So what happened was that the angels, they struck before the Sahaba struck, right? And there was another story that the Sahaba was about to attack, but then the angel attacked before him, right? The angel cut off the enemy before he could cut off, right? And he could not believe what was happening, right? He could not. Then he saw someone on a horse, right? He saw someone on a horse, who did it, and then he later went to Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and then he told him that I was about to strike, but then someone just immediately, like in such a fast manner, such a quick manner, slayed the opponent and slayed my opponent, right? Before me even laying my sword, right? And then Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that this is an angel that helped you, right? So Allah sent an angel from heaven who helped the Muslims. Okay, and then if Allah wanted to, He could have helped the Muslims without any of the war taking place, right? Without the Muslims. 15 of the Muslims became martyrs, right? Without any Muslims becoming martyrs, Allah could have helped them, right? The angels would come, they would destroy everyone, and the Muslims would go home without doing anything, right? So why did Allah not do it? Huh? Yes, right? So the constant reminders that were given in Seerah is that we should always try our best, right? And after trying our best, then we should leave it to Allah, right? We should always try our camel, as it is said, and then we should leave it to Allah, right? So Allah's own help only came when you raise the sword, right? Once you raise the sword and you're about to strike, then only Allah's help is going to come. Allah's help is not going to come if you're going to just sit and say, "Oh, please, Allah, help me," right? It's not going to come, right? And this is still the way of Allah, right? It is the way in which Allah helps His people. The people have to put their effort first, and then Allah helps, right? It's not the other way around. Okay, and therefore in this battle it was demonstrated as well that the Muslims, they were armorless, right? They were without most of the animals, right? And still they had the courage to fight. And therefore, because they had the courage to fight and they went out, they risked their lives, that is why Allah helped them. Okay? With the 1,000 angels. And then there is an interesting story because Battle of Badr is composed of stories. Of course, we don't know what happened during the entire battle. There are just snippets that we know. So an interesting story of Ukasha bin Mihsan, right? So this particular Sahabi, he was fighting and his sword broke, right? And then he came to Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and he said that I only had one sword, it broke. So what should I do? Then Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam gave him some twigs and told him to fight with the twigs, right? And then he was so keen, he went out, he started fighting with the twigs, right? And then Allah transformed his particular twig into a sword, right? And which he kept with him, right? So that twig was transformed into sword. But it was only transformed into sword when he went with the twig and fought. Okay, had he been like, oh, I don't know, how can I fight with a twig, right? These people had swords, these people have armors, how can I fight with this? How can I fight with a twig, right? So then, of course, nothing would have happened, right? But then because he was keen and Muhammad told him to fight with the twig, and he did not question, and he went and fought with a twig. Therefore, his sword was converted, or his twigs were converted into swords, and that became the best sword which he had. Okay, a very interesting story about Ukasha. This is probably the only story that we have in the Seerah about Ukasha bin Mihsan. And then, of course, there were these two teenagers. One was Muaz, and the other was Muawwidh, right? So these two teenagers, about 16 years old, so they asked Abdurrahman bin Auf, who is Abu Jahl. Okay, then Abdurrahman bin Auf looked at them, and he was like, okay, you are going to kill Abu Jahl. In his mind, he was like, okay, he was a bit skeptical, but then he told them that, okay, he is the one, Abu Jahl, right? And then they looked at Abu Jahl, and then they struck Abu Jahl, both of them, right? Muaz and Muawwidh. So Muaz, when he struck Abu Jahl's own son Ikrama bin Abu Jahl, who would later become a Sahabi, right? And he would fight against the Romans. He would play a major part in fighting against the Romans. So Ikrama bin Abu Jahl then cut the hand of Muaz out. Okay, not completely out, but there was some tendons that were there, right? Then Muaz took his other hand, and then he ripped his hand off, and then he fought with the other hand, right? So 16-year-old. So, sorry? No, he did not die. Muaz did not die, but Muawwidh, he died in that particular. He was martyred in this battle. Okay, so they were the ones who lent severe blows to Abu Jahl, and then Abu Jahl then was about to die, but then after the battle, then Muhammad asked the Sahaba to look for Abu Jahl. Okay, and then Abu Jahl was seriously wounded, but he had not died yet. Okay, so Abdullah bin Mas'ud was the one who found him. You guys remember the story of Abdullah bin Mas'ud that I told in the previous session as well? I think I told it, right? That Abdullah bin Mas'ud was not of a very big stature. He was small. He was very skinny, right? And therefore, once what happened was that he was climbing a tree. So his legs were exposed, his shins were exposed. So they were very skinny. So the Sahaba, they began laughing at his skinny shins. So then Muhammad came and he said that, why are you laughing? Then Sahaba said that we are laughing at how skinny he is, right? Then Muhammad said that his legs are heavier than the Mount of Uhud, right? So this is the Abdullah bin Mas'ud that we're talking about. Okay, so he went there and he went to Abu Jahl, and then Abu Jahl started cursing him, so he killed him. So he lent the final blow, and Abu Jahl was already dying, right? So Muaz, in the Seerah books, you will see that Muaz and Muawwidh were the ones who killed Abu Jahl, because they were the ones who dealt the decisive blows. Okay, whereas the final blow was given by Abdullah bin Mas'ud. Okay, and then another person, Umayyah bin Khalaf, who was the persecutor of Bilal radhiyallahu anhu. He was the owner of Bilal radhiyallahu anhu, and he was the one who used to put stones on his back and used to torture him a lot. Okay, so he was a friend of Abdurrahman bin Auf. Okay, Abdurrahman bin Auf is one of the 10 blessed. Okay, so he was a friend, and therefore when the Quraysh, they started fleeing, so he asked refuge from Abdurrahman bin Auf, and he begged him to take him as his prisoner. So Abdurrahman agreed, okay, I'm going to take you as the prisoner. And therefore, when he was taking Umayyah bin Khalaf to Muhammad as his prisoner, then Bilal saw Umayyah bin Khalaf, and he said that, okay, give this person to me. Then Abdurrahman said, no, okay, Bilal, calm down. We are going to go to Muhammad and we are going to sort it out. And Bilal said, okay, give this person to me. Right? You have to remember the battle is already going on, right? The Quraysh are fleeing, but the battle is still going on, right? So this is still wartime. It's not after war, right? So after war, of course, then Muhammad is going to make the decision, but during wartime, it's actively fighting time. Okay. So then Bilal said, no, give it to me, and I'm going to fight him. Okay. Then Abdurrahman said, no, he's my prisoner. I'm going to go to Muhammad. Then Bilal surrounded him with different Ansar, and then tried to force Abdurrahman bin Auf away from Umayyah bin Khalaf, right? So he told him, get away from him because I want him. Okay. Then Abdurrahman was, of course, he gave Umayyah bin Khalaf to Bilal, and Bilal was the one who killed Umayyah bin Khalaf. Okay. So all the years of persecution and torture, right? So Bilal then finally dealt the final decisive blow to Umayyah bin Khalaf. Okay. And then Abu Jahl died, Umayyah bin Khalaf died, right? And then 70 of the Quraysh, they died in this particular battle. Okay, and 70 were taken as prisoners. Okay, and the ones who were taken as prisoners, only 2 of them were executed. So one was Nadar ibn Haris. He was the one who used to make fun of Quran all the time, right? So when the Quran would come, he would make fun of the Quran all the time. So he was the one who was executed. And the other one was Abdullah. What am I saying? The other one was Uqba bin Abu Mu'ayt, right? He was the one who he was the one who tried to strangle Muhammad Sallam. He's the one who laid the carcass, right? Brought a carcass and threw it on Muhammad Sallam. He was the one who did it, right? And he was the one who was executed in this battle as well as the prisoner. Only, amongst the 70 prisoners, only 2 were executed, and these were the 2 who were executed. And in this battle, 15 Muslims were martyred as well. Okay, so 313 or 315 odd Muslims and about 1,000 Quraysh, and the Quraysh suffered heavy blows, whereas amongst the Muslims, only 15 of them were martyred. Okay, and yep, this marks the end of this session. Jazakallah, any questions? Sorry? So after the second pledge of Aqaba, when at what point it became obligatory? It becomes obligatory to migrate, right now, like anytime. So if you are not able to do your obligations, then it is obligatory to migrate, right? So if you're not able to pay salah, then it is obligatory to migrate. You're not able to keep, like for example, let's say in a particular land, the government says that, okay, no salah for Muslims anymore, then the Muslims are obligated to migrate. So if you're not able to generally do your obligations in Islam, then you're obligated to migrate. Yeah. And of course, there are many opinions about this, but on this point, everyone agrees that if you're not able to do your obligations, then you have to migrate. Any other questions? So someone on the chat said 1-to-1 combat, right? Ali said 1-to-1 combat, and I missed his chat. Okay, so if you know the answer, then just unmute yourself and tell me what is the answer. Any other questions? If not, then we can call it. Okay. Thank you so much.